was entering a career as a historian, an academic historian. But circumstances of various kinds, including political, I think influenced his decision to make this turn toward art, which I had the wonderful privilege of witnessing. A friend of ours, I think, played an important role, Rodolphe Burger, and so there was a small community there. And Salvatore embraced this and undertook a career that is, in my mind, quite extraordinary in that Salvatore has never compromised with the art market. And this comes from deep political and also, I guess, commitments relating to his research and his character. But nevertheless, this is I can't think of an artist that I have gotten to know who has been more authentic in that sense. And he's moved through stages of creativity, always I think, functioning as philosophically and historically in relation to what he's doing. So it is a very profound creative project. At the same time, it is uncompromisingly art also. And it has gone through transformations, and he's in different periods. Each time you will recognize continuities, but there are quite significant transformations in the material character of his works. So it has been fascinating to watch from a distance in the last 20 years, but nevertheless, it's been fascinating to watch, and I'm really, really happy to be able to share this time with him tonight with you. So I won't take this any farther. I do recommend that you look at his website after this. Some of the materials that he will show come from that website, I think.
Yeah, with my name.
They can be found there.
My name.
You can find some things there. But yeah, you can see many more works there. I recommend that you take a look. But with that, I'll leave the screen to Salvatore, and with my thanks for this.
Okay. Thank you to you for having invited me, and thank you to Nemanja for having so proudly organized the event. And I think that my schedule program will change slightly following what I've been hearing this afternoon. And I was very impressed because there is this sort of despair that we are all feeling. And I appreciated the clarity of the Jewish filmmaker, whose name Udi, because I'm like other artists, I suppose, are thinking, what to do now, how to be now. And he said one should go on with art, philosophy of thinking, and activism. And I would add that one should need a third arm, friendship. I think that friendship, but not as a friendship of people who gather to complain about how difficult are times, but friends who gather to share joy and just being together. So I will. You want to add?
Are you comfortable sitting there? Because I think
yes, but now I will go closer.
No,
but no, I will go closer. No, because I need to read the quotation. No, I will be. Okay. I'll go closer.
I'll move out of your way.
Okay. So I will. Now I will give you a quote from another text I wrote on friendship on dark times. And you might know that the first time that, probably the first time that Hannah Arendt went back to Germany in 1995, after the war, was to receive the award of the Lessing Prize. And I quote part of her speech, very short. History knows many periods in which the public space darkens and the world becomes so uncertain that people no longer ask politics except to pay due attention to their vital interests and their private freedom. You can call them dark times. This is a Brecht expression. From the point of view of a humanity that has not lost the solid ground of reality, a humanity in the reality of persecution, they should have said to themselves, German, Jew, and friend. In all cases in which such a friendship existed at that time, in all cases where it has been maintained in its purity, that is, without false complexes of guilt on the one hand, and false complexes of superiority or inferiority on the other, a spark of humanity has been produced in a world that has become inhuman. It is a thought born of the first-hand experience of the Jew as pariah. I would suggest you an article by an Italian theorician called Enzo Traverso. You must know him. An article called Dark Times, Judaïté et politique chez Hannah Arendt, in Revue Française de Sciences Politiques, année 2009. Okay, now I go on with my scheduled talk, which will last 30 minutes if you are patient enough, 30, 40, we'll see. A quotation again. And in you, I will tell you at the end from whom. And in you, on the other hand, that there is no more effective way to break the spell of tradition than to cut out the rich and strange, coral and pearls, from what had been handed down in one solid piece. Do you understand me well? Should I cry even louder? No, it is okay? Thank you. Point one, Findlinge. There is a German word with two significations, Findlinge. It means both erratic rocks deposited by glaciations in territories of a different geological nature and foundlings. This multiple definition doesn't exist in French or Italian, although it does refer to an object found in a place where it doesn't belong, as well as an abandoned being who is taken in and adopted. Tourists and travelers strolling through Berlin after the fall of the wall, November 1989, might have stumbled across a gigantic flea market in the Potsdamer district, which had become a huge wasteland after the bombing of the Second World War. It seemed as if all the inhabitants of East Germany had gathered there to sell off their few possessions and, above all, their own history. You could buy Soviet signs, all the sewing machines, bicycles for pennies on the dollar, but above all, lots of paper documents and family photos. This place is where the course of my artistic work changed, and I began to work directly on the images and documents I found. My first major installation, Ashen Glorie, was made up of pieces assembled at the Potsdamer Platz, while later ones were based more intentionally on archival images of psychiatrists or quite simply doctor. I used X-ray plates during these years. For me, X-rays were at the same time a way of hiding the body and a translucent negative screen through which one could guess and decipher the image. At the time, I was very interested in the question of translations between text and image. I would always been struck by little phrases and quotations I'd come across while reading books. A short story by the Romantic writer Adelbert von Chamisso had stayed with me for many years. The story of Peter Schlemihl, who sells his shadow to the devil in exchange of everything he could possibly want but ultimately cannot exist without this immaterial thing. It cannot have back its shadow. And also a note by Søren Kierkegaard on reflective melancholy. It is this reflective grief that I intend to evoke and, as far as possible, illustrate with a few examples. I call them tracings of shadows, to recall by this name that I borrowed them from the dark side of life, and because, like tracings of shadows, they are not spontaneously visible. The Danish word for those figures is skiggerits. This is the work called skiggerits. Yet, another work on the idea of shadows that might reveal something unexpressed. It's based on a single photograph which depicts a child in the 1930 Italy, expropriated from himself, shown in a warlike attitude that he could perhaps not help adopting. In the photographic pose, of course, every photograph isolates and iconizes its subject. The child is promised, consigned by the adults responsible for him to the regime that will guarantee him the future in which he is thus inscribed. Here you have three variations on the theme. A child in uniform making the fascist gesture, a child in uniform with a club, a child in uniform with a portrait of the Duce. This tenderness in the act of placing the toddler in front of the photographic lens, which is ultimately how we take our children's photos, is matched by a threat. This child, who is already a soldier, will be on the winning side. His uniform already protects him while giving him the symbolic and the ideological markers of his adult life. This is the variation I made on these single photographs, adding transparent material, shadows, grids. 2. Interlude. In this work, named Ex Voto, whose obvious reference is to the walls of the Italian churches covered in metal pieces or paintings depicting an incident from which one has been saved by divine intervention, I intervene on my own drawings and document in the same way as on found papers. The mosaic configurations means that each piece, while unique, cannot live without the others that surround it and give it complementary meanings. The LED frame built at the same time as the image it encircles is one with the work. To flatly speak, I take a figurative item out of its context to give it to another provisional meaning. 3. Identifications. In January 2008, a garbage collector working near the Central Police Station in Rome found 2 large garbage bags full of photographs. They contained 8,000 images of identification, surveillance, and evidences, which, having outlived their usefulness in current investigations, had been thrown away to make room instead of being deposited in the National Archive. The recovered images were purchased by Il Museo del Louvre, an antiquarian bookshop and gallery, who paid the garbage collectors who would find all the pieces. And which prepared an exhibition of them and passed on the information to the newspaper. But on the very day of the inauguration, the Carabinieri, mandated by the Superintendents for Cultural Heritage and accompanied by 2 archivists, came to the gallery to seize all the material on display as well as the exhibition catalogs. An assistant to the gallery owner pocketed one of them, and it was from this single surviving copy that I drew and recovered 6 images. They probably came from the Vice squad and, judging by the subject's appearance and clothing, may date from the late 60s. By working on them, I wanted to take up the idea of a fashion show when putting these representations, which have a certain plastic elegance, one after the other. Using chemical means, I superimposed texts taken from a syllabary for popular school. There is no relationship between the different elements of this work other than the one I have imposed. I'm used to work in series to present many variants to the solution of a formal problem I've posed myself. In the series I'm showing here, I've tackled the question of pose and frontality, which always concerns this type of image. I'd like to point out a difference here. While identity is a quality, or better still, the set of qualities and relationships that define an individual, identification is a process. The set of acts we need to recognize an individual among others. In some of these photographs, you can see the metric grid that serves as the background for the portrait. It reminded me of the damsel who are kind of wallpapers in the village parties, waiting to be invited to the ball. In English, they are called wallflowers, a term also used to describe a shy person. This series, it's called Leçons d'Anthropométrie, was born of research in the archives of the Gard department, south of France. Every homeless person, especially nomads and itinerants, was required to carry an anthropometric pass drawn up according to the standards dictated by Alphonse Bertillon, the inventor of the portrait robot, and stamped each time they entered and left a commune. This carnet, whose obvious aim was to control the gypsy population, was used to 1912 to 1969. In addition to personal data, it contained the bearer's front and side photos, as well as the prints of his 10 fingers. I have reproduced 6 photos of members of the same family taken in the early 1920s on glass, and I have superimposed them on the articles of the passport rules. These articles are transcribed with a black felt tip pen on cardboard cutouts, like those shown by beggars to collect money. Phantom builder. This example of the difficult relationship with the truth of an image is the most paradoxical. This is a work which dates from already 12 years ago, so things have changed since then. I'm thinking of the German police robot portrait, which can easily be found on the internet, and to which I've made a slight change. Technically speaking, these images are photographs, photographic reproductions. At the same time, they don't reproduce anything. They are nothing more than artificially reconstituted memory. What they represent doesn't exist. Yet we are in the presence of an image as credible as a real photograph. These are photographic montage. Whether they are digital or not makes no difference to my point. Several pieces of reality do not necessarily constitute another reality. They do, however, create a kind of icon of a face which appears strangely smooth to our gaze, and from which something doubly disturbing emerges. To the mortifying past-fixing activity of photography is added a kind of cadaverization of the image. This is exactly what Alfred Döblin had in mind when he introduced August Sander's book Antlitz der Zeit, Face of Our Time. To be precise, Döblin compares the leveling imposed by death to the one created by social conventions, and looking at Sanders' work, he thought of the famous wax mask, much represented in those years, L'Inconnue de la Seine, a drowned girl found in the Seine River, which had this kind of smooth, almost smiling expression that appealed, police to make a death mask. Sander photography book, at least the site was published in 1929. I can't fail to mention here another portrait Sander made of his son Eric, who died in prison in 1944. He was a communist militant, but a dissident communist militant, his son Eric, who would produce a political leaflet in his father's laboratory. Protected by his father. A portrait of a portrait in wax. It makes me think that photographic portraiture and sculptural portraiture are ultimately the same thing. It is just the reproduction technique that changes. For 1900, a dozen years after the completion of my 2006 installation Ex Voto, which I mentioned earlier, and 30 years after my discovery of the Potsdamer Platz and the beginning of my work with found images, I presented a new installation based on photography. This time, the installation was more decidedly history-oriented, and our common history intertwined with my biography. In this sense, I historicize myself as a man who lived most of his life in the past century, and that's why I named this installation 1900. About this method of recollection and transformation. Today, it would be considered aberrant what the archaeologists of the King of Naples did when Pompeii was rediscovered in the 18th century, or what clandestine tombaroli, grave robbers, do in Etruscan burials. Enter from above and penetrate from one underground, from one room to another, by breaking through the walls just to bring precious objects back to the surface. Since the second half of the 19th century, archaeology, even the preventive archaeology that closes everything up after excavations, has been working by removing layer after layer. Stratigraphy, whose main purpose seems to be the preservation of the context of the find, is the opposite of penetration in search of the rare pearl or simply of a pearl. 5, Galatina. I'm about the two-thirds of my talk. Galatina. I became interested in the subject of it Taranta, which in Italy is far from being just a subject for ethno-demo-musicological study, but has become a phenomenon of popular culture, both scholarly and mass. Because, given my age and geographical origins, I myself could have been one of these boys watching the Tarantolata from the windows of the Oval. I have undertaken the translation into French of a text written by Salvatore Quasimodo, winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1959, to whom the film director Gianfranco Mingozzi addressed himself, once ready to show his documentary film La Taranta in 1961. This series comprises 12 pieces, each bearing one or two letters from the phrase "Et in Arcadia ego," the famous sentence that was written on Guercino and Poussin painting of bucolic landscapes. Each painting is decorated with blank puzzle pieces painted in fluorescent red and applied according to the Fibonacci sequence, from 0 for the first to 89 for the 12th. As we know, the Fibonacci progression, born to calculate the reproduction rate of rabbits, considers each number as the addition of the two preceding it. But the last picture in the series, the puzzle, which shows nothing but rather hides the image as it progresses, is almost completely filled in. I confess that I chose this formula while thinking of Mario Mer's Crocodilus Fibonacci, 1972, among others. Let me now briefly show you another work derived from a documentary film by Gianfranco Mingozzi, Con il cuore fermo, Sicilia, from 1965. Its subject is the immigration to which young Sicilians are forced, oppressed by feudal agricultural system and admittedly by the power of the mafia. Here the geographical map is cut out in order to show the red letters of the film title, keeping Mingozzi typeface, Con il cuore fermo, Sicily, with a firm earth, with a solid earth, Sicily. 6, morbid phenomena. I don't know if Antonio morbid phenomena, there is a famous quotation from Antonio Gramsci letters from the prison that it has been translated very, in the most provocative way. Between the past is fading away, but there is no yet the new. In this interreign, in this gap, monsters show up. But actually, it is just not precise, the quotation, because Gramsci never mentioned monster, but various morbid phenomena. This was his sense. But there are studies over this phrase, also recent ones. And it was written in 1930, and it wasn't referring neither to the economic crisis of 1929, nor to the Nazis that wasn't there yet, but probably surely to the to the Stalinism that the Italian Communist Party had accepted in 1929. So the morbid phenomenon was one could say involution of one could say the crisis of the socialism, let's say. It becoming an authoritarian state. Okay. I don't know if Antonio Gramsci was ever in Urbino, but I made sure to bring him there in images 4 centuries after Paolo Uccello. This is the power that the artist has as opposed to the historian. This is the last work in the Fenomeni Morbosi Svariati series from 2023. This series includes 3 reproductions of scenes from Paolo Uccello, Miracle of the Consecrated Host, commissioned by the Urbino Corpus Domini Confraternity and calling for strongly anti-Semitic representations. I will linger on this matter, but if necessary, but in my text I mentioned the several articles on this painting. I did superimpose to the painting reproductions, several holdings from the National Archives in Rome, among other the manual transcription of a letter seized from an inmate of fascist prison in 1929, which I transcribed in 1979 when I was a daily visitor of the archives for my research about the Roman labor movement. And then another, let's say, exhibit, like the very last picture of Antonio Gramsci that was a few months before his death, taken in a police post station. This one. In this synthesis work that I am showing you, I have reproduced Gramsci's identification portrait without modifying it, and I have transcribed the Roman anti-fascist messages in bold pastel, respecting his grammatical errors. We comrades are all isolated, waiting for the moment when a little light can shine on us, because now we live in darkness. In the imagery of darkness and light, I can't help but think of religious persecution. I am also touched by the expression, however banal, noi altri, used by the comrade Candido. Curiously, the automatic translators give in French le reste d'entre nous. Perhaps through a computer glitch, there is some truth to it. Ce qui reste de nous, what's left of us in a time of darkness. But I like to translate it, forcing it a little, of course, with the others in us. 7, we are, I have 5 more minutes. Ruins in the forest. For some years now, I have been working on the theme of nature subject to civilization, and vice versa, well knowing that after Philippe Descola, Behind Nature and Culture, first publication, Paris 2005, a natural space free of human vision and intervention doesn't exist. In the photographs I make around Europe, there is always a natural element that predominates over the co-presence of artifacts reduced to traces and signs. It is the concept of rupestrian which interests me. On this purpose, I went back to Dante Alighieri, particularly the verses in the comedy where he talks about the ancient forest, which is nothing but a representation of the earthly paradise. I dealt allegorically with the subject of an Eden lost and not yet found. I developed it into 2 series of painting. I call them paintings, to be shown face to face. The first series presents 10 digital print on glass through the image thus rendered transparent. One glimpses Dante's text from the Canto 28 of the Purgatory, reproduced on Canson paper continuously without a caption. This is the canto in which the poet, bidding farewell to Virgil, find himself in the delightful garden from which the first sinners were banished. So perfect is this garden that even animals are absent from it. Natural elements and human element are indiscernible here, merged in what could be a vision of the world after the passage of the humans, a world returned to primeval forests. It is not known whether a pearl fisherman from another galaxy might find there the bones that have become corals, the eyes turned into pearls, not even by employing the anti-scientific technology foreshadowed by Hannah Arendt, perforation versus stratigraphy, in the necessary destruction of the past that allows the extraction of what is precious and rare. This second series, the, let's say, human traces are more evident. I also transcribed this inscription et in Arcadia ego. With this series, I try to oscillate between a certain beauty of the image and its admonitory character. Nothing here is spectacular or dramatic, but I think that over some restlessness there, a feeling that unites us and makes us human think. 8 and last. Monstrum Nostrum. 2021, December. It was while leafing through an illustrated book on the oceans that belonged to one of my children in early December 2021, in the middle of the COVID crisis, that I came across, or rather stumbled upon, some old engravings depicting sea monsters. My mind must already have been on a subliminal quest for nightmarish images, since the other two books next to the bed were Monstros by the Portuguese philosopher José Gil and Emanuele Coccia's Metamorphose. So I searched for and picked up again the great bestiary by Ulisse Aldrovandi, Italian physician, philosopher, and one of the inventors of natural history. That is to be placed in 1605. Is Monstrorum Historia, published in Bologna in 1642. A copy of this work entered the library of the Chartreuse de Villeneuve-les-Avignon the following year. It was in my hand on a table at the Carré d'Art in Nîmes the day after my sleepless night. Of all the monstrous creatures listed by Aldrovandi, I choose sea animals. They seem to me more capable of adapting to the habitats I have tyrannically imposed on them in my montages. In September 2023, invited to the closing ceremonies of the Rencontre Méditerranée in Marseille, Pope Bergoglio spoke of how the Mediterranean Sea was in danger of becoming a sea of the dead. Quote, and then there is a cry of pain that resounds more than any other, and which transforms the Mare Nostrum into a Mare Mortum, the Mediterranean, the cradle of civilization, into the tomb of dignity. It is the muffled cry of migrant brothers and sisters. In December 2023, the same statesmen to whom the Pope was addressing were passing an anti-immigration law that won't even guarantee the continuation of their power. The change of title of my series comes from historical contingency, from Histoire des Monstres to Monstrum Nostrum, our monster. 2025, January. In the old naturalist school, however, the monster has still something human, a kinship with humanity, while being the very expression of otherness. While they are outcasts, aliens, we, along with Ulisse Aldrovandi, seem to be able to speak the same language as them. We wonder if we could befriend them. And I also like to think that the only inhabitant of the island where Prospero was stranded, Caliban, half man, half fish, could well be represented by one of the drawing by Aldrovandi's engraver. But what seems to me to have changed radically in the Western world over the last few decades in an increasingly accelerated fashion, and which is undermining all the principles of the Enlightenment, secular humanism, and even Christian humanism, is the conception of the other. It's like a summation of the foreigner, perceived as a block of otherness and danger, and obviously considered less human than us. Moreover, it seems that certain principles of the Roman Empire have won a majority in that part of the Western populations that still votes, those of a world divided into winners and losers, dominators and dominated. This is the legacy that colonialism has left us. For over 3 years now, I've been doing photographic paintings of sea monsters landing on the shores of the Mediterranean. And I've been wondering who is the more monstrous, these fish or amphibians with humanized faces, or those who leave them to die on the beaches. I was wondering about the monstrous part of Western mankind. This series that kept me busy for the last years was my only artistic activity, apart from my applied art productions. It also echoes the political and social changes we are going through. In the winter of 2024-25, I once again drove along the coast of the Middle Sea, from Portbou in Spain to Vietri, south of Italy. I photographed places I already knew in summer light. These shores look very different in winter. They are transformed by autumn storms, with all the debris and wrecks that cover them and are cleaned up as summer approaches. I have transcribed texts from Aldrovandi's work on the printed engravings in a hasty, scrappy way. Passages from William Shakespeare's Tempest, those from Ariel's songs, Full fathom 5, thy father lies, of his bones are coral made, those are pearls that were his eyes, nothing of him that doth fade, but doth suffer a sea change into something rich and strange. Thank you.